Hi everyone, my name is Olivine Brown, and the topic of my paper is I'm a Barbie girl in a Barbie world. And the purpose of the paper was to look at the impact of cross-cultural differences on eating disorders. The specific disorder that I looked at was anorexia nervosa. I thought of the topic while having a conversation with a friend of mine who's also an immigrant to the United States, and she confided in me that she recently developed an eating disorder and she no longer was seeing herself as beautiful. From this conversation, I was curious to know why such a drastic change. This curiosity led me to the thesis question: is anorexia a culture-specific syndrome, or is it a cultural change syndrome? From the research, it shows that anorexia was always present in these societies with culture, and it dictates the behavior and the prevalence of the disorder. The research that I focused on was the cross-cultural differences between countries such as China and the United States. Before we begin, I want to start by debunking a few myths. The first myth, anorexia is a Western-bound syndrome. Myth 2, anorexia is a problem found only in white middle-class women. And myth 3, anorexia is a result of thin culture, and that is the obsession with being thin. In 2002, K.J. Simpson argued the theory of anorexia nervosa is not a Western-bound virus. He uses recent studies that support his argument and exposes a high prevalence within non-Western societies. Another incorrect assumption is that a white middle-class woman demographic, but there is an increase among Black women and women of various social economic levels. While for myth 3, this myth of thin culture, Lynn P. Anderson and J. Lynn sampled 80 beliefs in schoolgirls for the separate analysis of eating beliefs and eating behaviors using the EAT-26 in people undergoing rapid culture change. The EAT-26 was uniquely implemented for the preservation of cultural differences in eating beliefs and behavior. Due to the rapid cultural change, the girls were experiencing what is called acculturation stress. This form of stress is seen in immigrants during the adjustment to a different culture. The results showed more distortion in the participants' eating beliefs than their behaviors. The beliefs surrounded approval from boys in their age group. Those with higher belief scores had higher chances of favoring a thinner body build and a male approval from their peers. Meanwhile, girls with higher behavior scores had lower chances of reporting eating when famished. In other words, although the girls' beliefs are like Western ideals, that is, desire being thin, their behaviors are lagging. For example, the report showed fewer alterations in diet and exercise compared to Western girls. Such a distinction indicates an assessing risk if anorexia is only considered on the basis of behavioral aspects. In these populations, disordered eating for immigrants must be analyzed based on the changes in their beliefs. The researchers emphasize the need to study these eating beliefs to understand the true scope of the disorder. So, what are the theories? For the first theory, it focuses on a distinction between women's and men's labor. Women were not only thinking about their husband and children, but also themselves post the industrialization of the United States. Here, women became more individualistic, where her ideas and practices focused more on their impact on herself. Therefore, there was a drastic change in her body perception and thus a change in the sense of her body fat. In support of the division of labor, Sarner, Levin et al. 2018 sampled young Israeli women. During the experiment, the researchers cleanly analyzed the parents' gender role identity. The parents of the anorexics and the non-anorexic groups also completed the BSRI. The outcomes revealed that the anorexic participants scored low in masculinity traits. They also found that the mothers of these groups scored low on both masculinity and femininity measures than the control group. These masculine traits showed to be a protective barrier protecting against the consequences of selflessness. Through the division of labor, we understand the contrast in the cultural wheels of wealth. For example, in Western societies, anorexia usually is associated with high-income families. Meanwhile, plump body types typically reveal wealth and standing in the East. For our second theory, we know that food and eating habits serve as a social marker and symbol which reveals the depths of human culture. In 2002, Simpson also revealed that food diaries can be an excellent way to observe disordered eating. However, the motives are not always considered disruptive or as a disorder to the individual. Instead, they may have cultural significance. Simpson, 2002, recalls a study conducted on an individual addressed as Jane A. Jane A's religious beliefs and anorexia was collected through her detailed diary journals from her youth. And from the journals, it was revealed that the religious connotations were linked to her food refusal. Nowhere in the diary, however, is there a fear of fatness expressed. This concept of food control can also exist without the need for independence. For example, Simpson's Miss Y explained her food refusal stemmed from her lack of appetite and abdominal pain. Her complaints about her stomach were psychosomatic symptoms, which were a result of grief from losing her boyfriend. Simpson explained that in rural China, abdominal discomfort perfectly captures the depth of her sadness, rather than complaining of fat phobia. Here, Simpson suggests that culture sees the body as a complex symbol that can be used as a social communication, especially for illness. Thus, Miss Y gave meaning to her food refusal through a cultural influence. For our last theory, the theory hypothesizes that anorexics from an early age learn to be more responsive to others' perceptions than their needs. This is known as the anorexia and the issue with autonomy. For example, some women get anorexia and others do not, depending on how sensitive they are to the wishes and desires of those around them. Therefore, the anorexic relies heavily on the social norms to determine their sense of self. It is through this practice that social impacts Eastern ideas on beauty. Therefore, women do not conform to the Western standard. They may feel enormous pressure to adapt to this changing image. Again, by Sarner Levin, her study and everyone else's study showed that cultures that have high regard for opinions of others over the individual are sensitive to the disease. Masculine traits were negatively associated with altruism. In other words, the more masculine traits a participant exhibited, she displayed less altruism. In contradiction to the theory, while anorexics displayed fewer masculine traits, their mother displayed the opposite. For mothers who exhibited fewer feminine traits, such as affectionate, they became more disconnected and apathetic to their daughters. From a psychological approach, this disrupts disrupts the idea of self in their daughter and consequently leads to the development of eating disorders like anorexia. In conclusion, anorexia is not a cultural-specific syndrome, but a culture change syndrome. Due to these differences, signs and behaviors will vary from culture to culture, and for adequate treatment and understanding for the disorder, it should not be generalized. Instead, culture considerations should be incorporated into the family and individual treatment plans. Thank you for your attention. Keep safe, everyone. Thank you.